Hello and welcome to the 4th anniversary special episode of the Green Bean podcast. So this is not one of my usual episodes, so if you're new here it might not be the first thing that you want to start watching, or maybe it is, I don't know. Either way, whether you've been here for a while or this is your first time, welcome. My name's Katie and I've been recording YouTube podcast videos for 4 years now, and I wanted to do something a bit special and unusual to celebrate that milestone. And I decided on a Q&A, so viewers were able to leave me questions on my most recent episode, and I've done my best to answer them in the episode coming up. But before we dive in, I wanted to do a couple of thank yous, because there's a whole team of people that make this podcast possible, not just me sitting here in front of my camera. And one of the most important thank yous is to all of the lovely folks who support my work on Patreon. That's one of the main ways that I make my income these days, which is something I could never have imagined when sitting down in front of the camera to record my very first video podcast. So it's incredible that people like what I make and choose to support it, and really it's the support from Patreon that has made it possible for me to continue to produce these videos regularly for such a long period of time. I couldn't do it without you, so huge thanks to my Patreon supporters. And another huge thank you to Will McNicol, whose guitar music you hear accompanying all of my podcast episodes, almost from the very beginning. I think in the very first episode I didn't use Will, and then I spoke to him about using his music, and he was really happy and supportive and willing to let me use his music to accompany my episodes. And I think it's really, really perfect to go along with the outdoor footage that I share of beautiful Dartmoor around me where I live in Devon. And in this episode I'm using music from Miniatures, which is Will's latest album, which I haven't used in the podcast before, so the music's going to sound a little different this episode. It's a beautiful collection of really short pieces and I really love it, so I recommend checking it out if you like the music in my podcasts. And what I decided to do in this episode was pick out some of the best outdoor footage from all 4 years of the podcast. So I'm going to do it chronologically. So the first outdoor footage you see is going to be some of the first we took before I had a gimbal, when I still had long hair. It's going to look really different, and then throughout the episode you'll see the passage of time, and I don't know, maybe you'll see that we got better at filming outdoor footage. I hope so, but I don't know. Anyway, so that's all of the preamble. Let's dive into the episode, and I hope you enjoy some walks out on Dartmoor with us and hearing the responses to viewer questions. Thanks for watching. So I'm going to try and address the questions one asker at a time. So some people had a couple of questions, or even more than that, but I'm going to try and address them one person at a time to break it down into chunks. So the first couple of questions came from Coconvert, who asked if there are any other crafts I would be interested in learning. Obviously the answer to that is yes. I'm kind of interested in all crafts, and if the opportunity presented itself, I would definitely take it. But particularly I would love to try my hand at ceramics. I've done a tiny bit of throwing pottery on the wheel in the past, and I loved it. I've also done a lot of model making with my hands. I've done some 3D stop motion animation with plasticine, so I know that I really love that kind of tactile sculptural stuff, so I think I could have a really good time with ceramics. Another craft that I would love to learn is basket making. I'd be really curious to learn something like that, but really any craft. Or how about woodworking? I definitely could get into woodworking. I think that would be fantastic. Anything. Give me all the crafts. Coconvert also asked what my ideal day would look like, and that is a really tricky question. I think I really enjoy variety, so I like to have a routine, but my routine tends to be for a week rather than a day, because I don't like to do exactly the same thing every day. I guess my ideal day wouldn't look too different from an ordinary day for me. It would have to include a bit of time spent with some crafts, a bit of time drawing, obviously some time with Jack, both cuddling time and walking time. I'm imagining on this perfect day that the weather would be beautiful, so I would be able to go for a freshwater swim somewhere, probably Dartmoor, but I'm not fussy. It could be in the sea. That would also be fine. Some lovely food, some time with my partner or some other favourite people. It wouldn't have to be much. It wouldn't need to be anywhere fancy or anything unusual in that respect. Just a few of my simple and most favourite things would make my perfect day. Next up, I have 2 questions from Len, who first asks if I have a dream project that feels intimidating, and I absolutely do. It is my idea that I want to sew myself a 3-piece suit, and this was one of the projects that was in my plan, my grand plan for my Make 9 in, was it 2020 or 2021? I don't even know what year it is anymore. Anyway, it has been in my grand plan for a long time, and I definitely feel intimidated by it. I feel like I've now got my my sewing pattern for trousers down. I feel confident that I can make a good pair of trousers that fits well and I feel comfortable in. I now need to go through that same agony that I went through with the trousers pattern, with both a waistcoat and a jacket, so that I can make this dream 3-piece suit. So I definitely feel intimidated by it. It's definitely not going to put me off. It just might take some time. And Len's second question is a really challenging one, and it's one that I've not stopped thinking about since I read it. Len asked, if green and brown were banned from my wardrobe, what colours would I wear instead? And honestly, I have no idea. I can't imagine wanting to get dressed if I didn't have anything green or brown to wear. I guess because I wouldn't have much choice, I would probably be wearing neutrals like grey or like natural sheepy colours that aren't brown sheep. I also like a bit of navy blue. I think navy blue is nice, and I enjoy wearing red, but only in small amounts and definitely not as much as green. I guess after green and brown, one of my other favourite colours is pink, but I definitely only enjoy pink in relation to green or brown and wouldn't want to wear all pink under most circumstances. This is a very difficult question, Len. I hope that my answer isn't too disappointing. I just don't know. I hope that green and brown never get banned from my wardrobe. That's my answer. Next up is a question from Elle, who asked if I was making art in my early life and whether the people around me noticed I had a talent and celebrated and applauded it. And I don't really know how to answer that question. I mean, yes, definitely. I was always creative and my family were super supportive and encouraging, but I was one of those children who was like really annoyingly good at everything, so I didn't like appear to be more talented in art than other things. So certainly at school my teachers pushed me more towards academic pursuits because I was academically pretty successful. I was quite bright and good at maths and I enjoyed science and all of that kind of thing. So at school I ended up getting pushed more towards to science. That's how I ended up at university studying biology, because I think there's always this idea that, I don't know, creative pursuits are less valuable, less important, for people who are less intelligent, which is just ridiculous and unfounded. And I feel really sad that, you know, academically creative pursuits are not seen as valuable as traditional academic subjects like sciences and maths and languages. So yeah, I was definitely supported and encouraged by my family creatively, but in terms of my starting out my career, I definitely could have started earlier by being encouraged at school when I really wasn't. So in a way that's a shame, but in another way I don't regret the time that I spent studying biology, and you know full well that I'm obsessed with nature and learning about habitats and the world around me, so I don't in any way feel disappointed with the way that things went, but I wasn't fully supported at school in terms of pursuing my idea of becoming an illustrator, for sure. Next up, I've got a group of 3 questions that I'm putting together because they all kind of lead into one another quite nicely. So first up, Nina asks how far away I live from the area where I do my filming. And I think that's a really important question, Nina, because I think sometimes people imagine an ideal version of my life as seen through the lens of my YouTube videos and think that I just walk out my front door and I'm on the beautiful rolling wild landscape of Dartmoor. It's not quite like that. I live in a village, and that village is about 20 to 30 minutes drive from the national park. So yeah, all of the places where you see us filming are really close to where I live, but they're not quite on my doorstep. They're a little bit of a drive away. And then Patsy asked who does all of the outdoor filming. And that is done by my kind and lovely partner. So we have a gimbal, which is I don't know, my technical language is really not very good. It's like a supported, kind of like a handheld tripod, I guess, for the camera that my partner follows us around with. The camera is mounted on it, and the gimbal keeps it relatively steady. We do sometimes struggle a bit with the wind and the uneven ground, but it is my lovely partner who follows Jack and I around on Dartmoor. Sometimes I do a bit of extra filming, so if you see shots of Dartmoor that are of the trees or I don't know, ferns blowing in the wind, lichens, water flowing, all of those kind of shots tend to be filmed by me. My partner is the one taking the shots with me and Jack in them. Which leads us on to Christina's question, which was, would I consider introducing my partner in an episode of the podcast? The answer to that is no. For two reasons. One is that it's my partner's wish. They're really quite private and don't want to be visible on the internet, and I fully respect that choice. But it's also a choice of my own as well. I don't talk about them very much, not because they're not a really important part of my life, but because I share an awful lot of my life and myself in these podcasts, and it feels really important to me to have something that I keep to myself and private. So that is something that's never going to get shared on my podcast. And you know, that's a really important decision to me, to respect that both for myself and my partner. So I hope that makes sense. I had to bring a special guest for this question because Sheetha asked possibly the question I get asked more often than any other whenever I share a podcast or a photo of Jack. Somebody always wants to know what breed he is, or for me to chat about him a little bit more. So I have no idea what breed Jack is, because he is a rescue dog. He came to my partner and I in 2015. So he's been with us for almost 7 years. And when we got him, he was 4.5. So that makes him now a very fine 11.5 years old. He's obviously some flavour of Jack Russell Terrier, but we don't know what that's mixed with or anything else like that. We don't really know much about him or where he came from. I love to imagine that he might have siblings out there in the world somewhere, but I've never really seen another dog that looks quite like him. He's pretty special. So he came to us from the RSPCA. We adopted him just because we really wanted a dog, and you know, it's always difficult browsing through the pet rescue websites trying to choose the one who's the right fit for you. But as soon as I saw him, I completely fell head over heels for him. And I remember phoning up the RSPCA and asking about him, and he had already been adopted and gone home with another family, but unfortunately, well, I mean, fortunately for us, unfortunately the first family that adopted him, it didn't quite work out, so he ended up going back into the rescue centre and coming home with us, and it turned out to be pretty amazing fit. I think it's been incredible having him with us, and I think because you usually see him kind of sitting here in my arms looking all floppy and adorable, which he very much is. He's definitely been a challenge, you know. I wasn't fully prepared for taking on the challenge of a slightly difficult and traumatized rescue dog. You know, I wouldn't swap it for the world. I would always have a rescue animal if I could, but it was difficult bringing him home. He had a lot of challenging behaviours. Many of you have noticed that we never let him off the lead. He's very reactive with other animals, including other dogs, so he doesn't have very many friends of his own kind. He loves humans, but he's not great with other dogs. He's also got a really, really strong prey instinct. Unfortunately, particularly for sheep. So whenever we're on Dartmoor, there are sheep around, there are cows, so he always absolutely has to be on the lead, otherwise he would run after them and probably kill them, so we need to be super careful. But he's amazing. He's just been such an incredible addition to the family. He's a completely delightful and loving friend, and I'm a little bit worried about, you can see that he's going very grey. Sorry buddy, don't want to embarrass you. He's starting to turn into a venerable old gentleman, so I'm not sure how many years of his fine company we're going to have left, but I fully intend to enjoy every single moment of them. Louise asked how my sewing projects are coming along, and the truth, Louise, is that there hasn't been much sewing action here lately for a very practical and boring reason. Simply because while I was making over my studio, I had to move everything out of here. There's a lot of stuff in this room. It had to go somewhere, and where it went was the kitchen table. And the kitchen table in this house functions both as an order packing station for my shop and as my sewing space. It doesn't ever get used as an actual kitchen table. So while everything from my studio was on the table, I haven't been able to do any sewing at all. So I'm really excited to get back to it. The first things that I'm going to make are hopefully a couple of new swimsuits, and then I want to really get into that three-piece suit. Maybe not the actual suit project, but maybe a couple of waistcoats, and maybe I will take on a jacket or blazer this year. and a winter coat, but then maybe I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm trying to be realistic about what I can achieve. So let's start with looking forward to making a couple of new swimsuits. Louise also asked a second question, which was, could I give a tour of my shop? And I can't give a better tour than the one that I recorded for Wonderwall in the very first lockdown of 2020. I'll pop the link down in the description box below. I think probably I could do an updated one at some point with, there's a lot of new things that have been added to the shop since then. But I think the Wonderwall one, it's just a really nice watch. I think it captures that moment of, how things were in the very first lockdown when, we were suddenly faced with all of these new challenges of, oh my goodness, I thought I could go and sell and show my products in person, but I can't do that. So how do I share them with the world in a different way? And I'm really proud of that video. So I recommend watching that one, Louise, for a peek at my kitchen table shop situation. Greta asked about the project that I feel most proud of, either as a knitter, an illustrator, or a sewist. And while I think it's a really good question, Greta, I'm not quite sure how to answer it, because I don't know if I feel proud of my work as such, and that might seem like a weird answer, but I certainly take pride in my work. I work really hard and I do a lot of attention to detail, and I'm very fussy about things being just right. But once a project is finished, I tend to just want to move on to the next thing. And it's not that I feel ashamed of the thing that I finished, it's just that that's how my interest and attention works. So once something is done, I'm not so proud of it as when I'm doing it. So I guess the thing I always feel most proud of is the thing I most recently finished, and I guess that applies at present, because I feel extremely proud of the fairy ring knitting pattern. You can see the artwork for that behind me, and the thing I loved about that project was it brought together a lot of my different creative skills. So I got to design a piece of knitwear, which I love doing. I've always wanted to be able to create my own clothes, so to be able to do a sketch and then translate that into an actual garment that I could make and wear was really special. But then I also got to accompany that with an illustrated booklet, so I got to use a lot of my different skills, so I feel really proud of it in that sense. And to be honest, another project that falls into that category of utilising lots of my different skills is my podcast. And I do feel extremely proud of this podcast, especially that I've been consistently producing it for 4 years now. It feels like a really huge achievement, and I love the fact that it gives me the opportunity to use different creative skills. So not only to share my illustration, my knitting and my sewing, but
I really enjoy the video editing process, both the filming and the putting these videos together. There's a lot of work. And a lot of pride that goes into making these YouTube videos as well. So yeah, that's certainly something I'm really proud of too. Now, I spoke in my last episode 37 of the Green Bean podcast, about receiving an ADHD diagnosis as a grown-up, which happened to me last year. And as a result of that, Jan Muggs asked about that process. So yes, I'm really happy to talk about that a little bit. It's quite personal, and I think it's probably a different trajectory, obviously depending on where you are in the world, but also even depending on where you are in the UK, because it's governed by your local healthcare authority. So things happen very differently at very different paces. Anyway, so I first looked into the idea of ADHD because I saw someone who makes comics on Instagram. Their handle is ADHD Alien. They make really, really cool and insightful and, you know, slightly unnervingly accurate comics about living as an adult with ADHD. And I didn't really know anything about it. I held the very stereotypical view of ADHD as being the idea of, you know, a naughty child, usually a boy, who is disruptive in class. And I never fitted that stereotype. I was very studious as a kid and very hardworking, and, you know, I never exhibited any of the traditional ADHD symptoms because I was highly interested and motivated in the work that I was doing. If I had been bored by my schoolwork, things might have been a different story. But anyway, I saw this comic about signs that you might have ADHD, and it covered things like very dysregulated emotions and having lots of projects on the go and always feeling like you can't finish things. Lots of different things that really hit home, and I had never really considered that before. So then on the back of that, I went and did some kind of research, did some of the online screening tools, and it came back very decisively with strong likelihood that you have ADHD, which really surprised me. As I say, I was not expecting that at all. So I took those questionnaires that I'd filled out to my GP and showed them to her, and she's like, oh yeah, okay, this is something that is worth us investigating. And then she referred me on to get the official assessment, which was an hour or so's appointment with a psychiatrist over Zoom, because that's how most things happen these days. So yeah, that's how it happened. It was a fairly straightforward process, and I'm still very much in the stage of adjusting to this diagnosis. As you know, I think if you're someone who's watched the podcast for a long time, I've had various different diagnoses throughout my life, mental health wise and physical health wise. So it's not completely earth shattering and life changing to have another one, but it's a different one, and it changes my perspective on the way that my brain works and figuring things out, and treating myself kindly and with understanding around things that I struggle with, I guess. So it's been illuminating for sure, and definitely interesting. And it's probably something I will talk more about in the future, but I hope that answers your question for now. And finally, the last question in this video came from Valerie, who asks how my next graphic novel is coming along. And no disrespect to you, Valerie, for asking. I understand why you would ask, but I must confess this is my least favourite question to get asked. I feel a lot of complicated feelings about graphic novel writing. So for those of you who don't know, I wrote and published a graphic memoir called Lighter Than My Shadow. It came out in 2013, which is all of a sudden a very long time ago, 9 years ago now. And ever since then, I feel like the world and myself has expected me to write another book. And that's not to say that I don't want to, or that I don't have ideas. I have much inspiration and excitement about it, but I've been on quite a journey with my creative process in those 9 years. First, after the book came out, I had a really difficult time with my mental health. I now understand that that was hormone related. It was because of PMDD. I had changed the hormonal medication I was taking at the time, and I had a hugely disruptive struggle with my moods for a few years after the book came out, and I basically became incapable of doing any creative work at all. I ended up stopping illustration and going to get a quote-unquote normal job for a while, and I did that for a few years, and that's actually while I was doing one of those normal jobs that I started doing this podcast. And this podcast has really kind of given me a way forward through that really difficult time with my physical hormonal health and my creativity, to start getting back into illustration and to combine that with my love of knitting, to be doing things that put those two interests together has been really amazing. But it hasn't yet come together for me to be able to think about a book. The other part of that is that writing a book is a huge investment of time and creative energy that doesn't offer an immediate financial return, or even one at all. Let's be completely honest. I think the world at large has an idea that being a published author means that you have a steady income for the rest of your days, and it is so not the case. It's only really the big bestsellers of the world who have such luxury as an author. It's really not a kind of feasible financial return for the amount of hours that go into it. And that's not to say that financial return is the only reason why you would do a thing. Absolutely not. But it does require practicality and thinking about how that would fit into my life alongside things like running my shop and doing my podcast, which I now rely upon to cover my living expenses. So it's complicated. I feel this is perhaps a long and boring answer to your question, Valerie. The straightforward answer to my how my next graphic novel is coming along is very slowly. It's burning away here at the back of my mind. It's something I'm always exploring. I'm actually starting to work with a coach who is helping me with figuring out my attention challenges with my work and creating some new systems and routines to help me figure things out. The whole refurbishment of my studio was part of that process, and creating a space that feels more like me and works more with how my brain works. But naturally, that process isn't finished yet, even though I thought it would take a couple of weeks. It's still ongoing, and how I figure out how to write a book while accepting that I'm always going to have multiple projects on the go. I'm always going to be switching between things. I don't know. It's a mystery. So first, I feel like I have some more work to do on the how I would even write a book before I can really properly delve into the next book. But the intention is there, and I'm happy with that for the time being until I figure things out. that's all for this Q&A. Thank you so much for joining me and watching along. To everybody who shared some questions, I hope that you enjoyed or found something interesting among the answers that I gave. And thank you so much for supporting my podcast through these 4 years. And I hope to see you in the next episode and for many more years to come. Take care. See you soon. Bye.